Welcome everybody to the June 2023 monthly meeting. Let's go to the agenda. So agenda for today. So there'll be a little editorial content for me before we do the agenda. But anyways, the official agenda has the oil industry subsidies. So we talked a bit about oil industry subsidies over the years, right? And of course, I think we all agree that we should want to reduce subsidies to the fossil fuel industry in general, so oil, gas, and coal. My understanding is there are no subsidies for coal in Canada at the moment, so you'll be happy about that.
I did.
The next topic will be a discussion of the North American charging standard, quote unquote. So Mike will talk about that and talk about the impact of the latest changes we've seen in terms of people adopting it, or some companies adopting NACS. And then Ryan, who will be arriving late, will be going over the CAA EV results. So CAA got a survey done by Plugshare. A bunch, about 10,000, I believe it is around 10,000 EV owners in Canada, and they've determined a bunch of things. And I think you will see that most of what's in the survey results is not news to us, but having survey results match what we've been saying, I think is a good thing. So it's good news overall, this thing, that it seems to align well with what we've been talking about and what we've been saying for a while now. After that, Mike's going to do the news like usual. Then we'll talk about past and future events and the roundtable as usual. Okay. So my editorial content here is I got a very interesting email today, and I distributed it to a few people and on a board and in Twitter. And so there's an organization called Mission Hydrogen. Okay, they've been around for a while, and the founder, the CEO of Wenger Engineering and founder or co-founder of Mission Hydrogen sent out an email today talking about some upcoming webinars. There's one on Wednesday. It's Wednesday morning. It's 4 o'clock European time, but it's 10 o'clock, I think, in the morning North American time. But essentially, I'm gonna step back a bit, even though people may not see me as much to be able to follow here. So, actually, I can follow here. Okay. So, anyways, this guy's been a hydrogen evangelist. Yeah. So it was almost a religion for him that hydrogen would be the future and this hydrogen economy would happen and all that, right? And so the title of the presentation or the webinar they're doing on Wednesday is, do we really need fuel cell electric vehicles? And some of the statements he made, and I highlighted some of them, is that fuel cell EVs are promoted by people who either want to produce and sell hydrogen, fuel cells, hydrogen tanks, or similar things. So essentially, what he's saying is it's all people who stand to profit from hydrogen. They're still talking about a future using hydrogen, okay? Then he talks about, I don't see any companies investing like crazy into hydrogen infrastructure, but if you look at the battery side, there are tens of billions of dollars being invested in battery production and R&D and all that, right? And then apart from the academic paper, he says, I don't see many companies investing like crazy. Okay, I talked about it already. Huge technology gap that has to be bridged if we think about very large heavy-duty refueling stations. This was a bit of a surprise to me, because I would have think that refueling large devices like heavy-duty trucks and planes and whatever else would be, relatively straightforward, given what people have been saying about that, right? But apparently he sees some challenges there. And he says, let's be honest, other companies are working on batteries and hiring, they're not hiring complete idiots, right? You've seen some very smart people working on batteries. And the technology has made incredible progress. And he says, far beyond any expert prediction. I would disagree with that. But a lot of hydrogen people have had their head in the sand for the last 10, 20 years. thinking that hydrogen would be the future, right? So, and then he goes on to say, I don't see many companies making money in their hydrogen as an energy carrier business. So he's talked about transportation, or he's talking about energy, the energy space for hydrogen, right? And but he says that he's seeing companies like BYD, Cattle, and others making humongous profits in the battery electric vehicle business. So, you know, wake up people and smell the coffee, right? So, Tesla and BYD becoming more successful. I'll just skip a few things here. But if you look at the last one that I highlighted, so food for thought, he's going to have some food for thought beyond the usual hydrogen as is my religion bubble, right? So he realizes that a lot of people have been in this bubble where they've, maybe 20 years ago, hydrogen was a good idea, but they haven't evolved with time. So very interesting. There's a link there. If you go to missionhydrogen.com, you can register for free for the webinar. I've been following a lot of the webinars to understand stuff about hydrogen. Two reasons. Reason number one, I want to know what they're saying and why they thought that hydrogen might work.
Know thine enemy.
Yeah, know thine enemy, but they're not really enemies. For me, I don't really care. I don't care. I don't hate or love hydrogen. It's just another friggin' element, right? So I don't care so much about the actual element. I care about what's practical to reduce greenhouse gases, right? So I want to understand why they think transportation. I want to understand the costs and all that. And I got a few little things about costs lately that are really interesting. I also want to understand how we could make green hydrogen for things that we cannot replace with so easily. Anyways, where we use hydrogen currently. And this is a screenshot. I don't know if Mitchell's online yet, but Mitchell sent me a similar thing today. This one comes from a presentation that this guy, and there's a link to the presentation at the bottom there. Very interesting presentation if you want to get, again, an overview of what the issues are in the hydrogen landscape. But what he's saying is the ones that are in pinkish there, reddish, those are areas where we need hydrogen, okay? And if you look at one of them, it's hydrocracking. Hydrocracking has to do with processing oil to make it more typically from heavier compounds to lighter compounds, so that they burn better in cars and all that. Okay, so if we reduce our consumption and our burning of fuels, we'll need less hydrocracking. Okay, so desulfurization, same thing. That's the oil industry that's using hydrogen also. Didn't know that, but cobalt. We knew about cobalt. I didn't know about hydrogen having a role in desulfurization. Anyways, bottom line is, and this was the keynote that's down there. If you're interested, it was a keynote at the last year's World Hydrogen Congress or something of the sort. So it's the biggest hydrogen proponents in the world that are being told this message by this guy. And at the end, the DMC, the Master of Ceremonies, essentially he looks like a deer in the headlights, and he's saying, well, I'm optimistic, and I've got rose-colored glasses, so I think some of this stuff is going to happen anyways. And you could tell he just didn't understand what was just discussed, or was in full denial. Anyways, very interesting content. Given everything that's happening, because one of my agendas is I would like the federal government to stop investing in hydrogen where it doesn't make sense. I want them to invest in hydrolyzers for green hydrogen, but not in fuel cells. Okay. So, anyways, that video is very interesting if you're interested in looking at it. So, oil industry subsidies, what they are and how big they are. So, again, we've talked about oil industry subsidies. Mostly informally over time, and one of my frustrations has been it's a bit like when we had debates on climate change before. Like 5 or 10 years ago, we talked about climate change. Oh, we got to do something. We got to do something. We got to do something. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? Nobody knew what to do. Now we know what to do, right? We know we need to electrify stuff. We need to stop burning stuff. There's a bunch of things we know that we could do. But with fossil fuel subsidies, well, what are these subsidies? And when I'm talking to my MP, or I actually spoke to Minister Wilkinson at a conference not too long ago. I want to know, specifically, this thing here that you're doing, it's wrong, and let's change that. Okay, so what I did is I did some research. It's very hard to get the data on this because the government is not necessarily upfront with it. So the focus is on the federal data, which is provided by Environmental Defense, but you'll see when you go through the data that it's not always clear what's in the data and what's not and all that. So one thing to note is that the provincial subsidies, they're quite big. So Alberta, according to some of the material from Environmental Defense, they subsidize the oil industry at the tune of $2 billion a year. Those are more direct subsidies or indirect subsidies in the sense that that $2 billion, which I think understates it, but anyways, it's actually money that they don't have to pay or money that they get from the government, okay? So there are other ways of helping an industry that's not giving them money or not taking money away. So when I mean not taking money away, the main way that Alberta does this is they charge very low royalty rates for extracting fossil fuels. Okay, it's ridiculous how low the rates are, and essentially what it's doing is it's fattening the coffers of the oil and gas companies, right? The other thing where we are not taking money that perhaps should be taken from these companies is through taxation and taxation measures. Okay, so Edmonton, not Edmonton, but Alberta is mostly in that category of stuff. So it's really more direct money that's not flowing into government coffers because of interventions that are done. Okay, so it's not there's no budget item that says we're giving them $2 billion a year, but there's a budget item that says that we're getting X $100 million a year for royalties, but in fact, they should be getting probably 5 or 10 billion or more a year in royalties, given that Canada is the 5th biggest producer of natural gas and the 5th biggest producer of oil on the planet. Okay, that's a lot of money. So why is the provincial government getting so little for royalties? It's because politicians are playing to that industry, right? So, and Alberta also has very low tax rates otherwise. So there's still no sales tax. There's the GST portion, but there's no provincial tax, and income taxes are quite low, right? And that hasn't impacted. That to me is an indirect subsidy. So many of the subsidies in there, they're not really fossil fuel specific also. So I'll go through them when I talk about each of the different categories that Environmental Defense has. So for example, if you're doing depreciation, it's a normal thing. If you have an investment, so if you're building a building and you're going to use it over the next 10, 20, 30 years, you depreciate a portion of it every year. Right? So some of that is in the list that Environmental Defense has. To me, that's not because it's not specific to that industry, it's not a subsidy as such. They're not treating them preferentially. Okay.
Well, it's like, I'll give you the example for electric cars. One of the reasons I put the electric car in my company was I can depreciate it at a ridiculously high rate compared to if I bought a gas car. So I think there are some subsidies for the gas industry.
So you'll see the first one is an accelerated depreciation.
Yes.
That is a subsidy, absolutely.
Okay.
It's treating that differently, okay?
Right, that's what,
Okay.
okay.
So that's the distinction.
Accelerated depreciation is a subsidy.
Absolutely, yes, it is. Yes,
Okay.
it is. Okay, so yeah, so a lot of them are not fossil fuel specific. Clean energy funding is difficult to assess. You'll see when you look at the programs in there, a lot of them are clean energy programs. Some of the money is going to fossil fuel companies. So you'll see there's a bunch of different programs that have to do with cleaning up stuff, okay? So cleaning up stuff to me doesn't necessarily mean that it's a subsidy for the production of oil and gas, right? So that's a bit of a gray area. Because even if they're doing something like, say, replacing a coal plant that's producing electricity to power pump jacks, if they replace that with wind and solar, green energy instead, it is better for the planet, right? Now, you might argue that the oil company should pay the full bill and there shouldn't be any money flowing there. could absolutely argue that. So in that sense, it is a subsidy. But my personal wish is that in cases like that, I would want that to continue so that we could push them to reduce their emissions no matter what, right? So some measures were COVID specific. And then, yeah, so I tried to compare some of the data from environmental defense from 2020 to 2022 to get a sense for trends, okay? Because what I was told by one of the other ministers, Mr. Irwin, I was told that most of the subsidies were removed. So I wanted to look and see what has been removed, what has not been removed. So you'll see that it's pretty interesting. So there's the sources there. I should have bought my glasses because I can't see on that thing unless I read on it. So the first one here, this is the one that's actually, it's a cost, it's a depreciation measure, but it's an accelerated depreciation. So this is a subsidy. LNG is liquid natural gas, as most of you know. So the good news though is it's set to expire in 2025. And they don't have data for how big that is. Now, I would imagine that's pretty big because if you look at the cost of deploying LNG terminals, you're talking, $10 billion type of stuff, right? So if they're depreciating that faster, it could be a substantial subsidy, right? Canadian development expense, that's a regular depreciation item, okay? So, and it doesn't just apply to oil and gas, it applies to mining and mining companies, including oil and gas. So it's just a regular depreciation. That number was, for in 2019, was 1.8 billion. Now, if you think about the amount of investments that have happened in the tar sands, as Mike wants me to call them.
There are. That's a fact.
So if you look at the investments they put there, there'd be a lot of depreciation against that because those are humongous investments, right? There's probably been 30 billion invested in the last 5 or 10 years in that space. So next one is carbon capture, utilization, and storage. Talked about that. It's it's unclear whether that's really a thing and really works and all that. That being said, I still think we need to prove there are some carbon capture technologies that will work, right? So remineralization of things, for example, will work. If they're doing carbon capture to do enhanced oil recovery, I don't think it's a good idea for the government to help them with that, right? And the amount would have been 50 million for 2022. Okay. Clean fuels and industrial fuel switching. So here, this is industrial fuel switching and clean fuels production. So this is where this one is a bit murky, not a huge amount of money, okay, but a bit murky because when you're talking about fuel switching, we could be talking about switching from natural gas to electricity.
So your LNG thing at the top there, I was just curious, so I Googled it.
Yeah.
So 2025 also happens to be the time when the Kitimat project is complete. It's $17 billion.
Yeah, that's a lot of money, yeah.
So
Yeah.
a little suspicious that they're sunsetting it right when the Kitimat project is going active.
I'm sure
17 billion.
I'm sure it's not a coincidence.
Mhm.
So again, here, the number here, this is it's supposed to be the money that goes only to the fossil fuel companies, not huge amounts, but amounts nevertheless. There's the clean fuels fund. So there's a lot of these things. There's a lot of budget items that touch in one way or another things we would call subsidies, right? So it's 1.5 billion over 5 years for clean fuel production in Canada. What does that mean? Not super clear. So it's probably things like blue hydrogen and renewable natural gas and things like that, right? It's probably mostly that kind of stuff. So that's probably more directly what I would consider to be a subsidy, right? Clean growth program. So this is research and development and demonstration projects in energy, mining, and forestry. So only a part of it is energy, and only a part of that would be oil and gas, right? So what they're saying here is this is the portion that would go to oil and gas. So that has increased over the last few years. Electric, this one's a nice one to know for all of you. So back when they had the the CDIP programs and all that, they used to include natural gas, compressed natural gas for subsidies for fueling stations, right? So in 2020, $8 million went to set up those stations. They cost somewhere around $1 million a pop. They're quite expensive. Zero in 2022. So that, I remember, was actually removed. They decided to exclude. So if you're, the current runs they have within our camp for charging and all that, there's nothing for compressed natural gas. There's still stuff for hydrogen though. Nothing for compressed natural gas. Okay. Emission reductions fund. This is to reduce methane emissions. This is going to the oil and gas industry, definitely, but it's to reduce methane emissions. Okay, so if you guys have been following the climate change stuff and the greenhouse gas stuff, methane is a very big contributor to.
They're reducing the methane emissions. They lie about how bad they are.
Well, so that's a complicated thing. So there's been a lot of developments in the methane leak space, including satellites now that detect methane leaks, right? So from my perspective, we want to spend money on doing that. Okay, we want to spend money there. Should the government be spending it, or there's?
I think that's industry and human history should be spent.
Should be spending it. Yeah. Okay. So that was here. No, that was there. So lots of different candidates and more.
You don't have to do them all. You
Okay.
don't have to go through all of them.
Well, okay, so I'll go through some in particular, okay? So, but a lot of them are for clean stuff that is sort of intertwined, right? With the oil and gas industry. The big one, there's two big ones, okay? One of them is EDC, your Export Development Corporate Canada, okay? It's actually Export Development Corporation. I don't think it's, anyway, whatever. What they do is they help Canadian businesses export products. Okay. So I have a slide on that after, but the amount here represents things like loans. Okay. So the true value, the actual accounting value of that loan is not $500 million because they're going to get the money back. Right. The value is how much less they would pay for the loan than if they had to go elsewhere. So, Export Development Canada, what their job is really is to make it easier for you to be able to do business with some foreigner that you may not trust. That if you're shipping a container of stuff to China, who knows if you're going to get paid, right? So EDC helps with that to make sure that there's arrangements where you get paid, and the same thing in the other direction. If you want to buy something from China, you want to have some assurances that it's going to get here, and all that stuff, right? So you don't want to pay the full amount in advance and then just lose the money, right? So that's a good part of the rule. There's a bunch of other things. I'll skip through the other tips. So this is the EDC slide. So I looked in the EDC case a bit more, and at the Glasgow conference last year, there was an announcement made in the Glasgow statement that Canada would stop funding any fossil fuel project, unabated, okay, fossil fuel energy project outside of the country. So if Shell Canada wanted to drill wells in Nigeria, EDC won't provide any funding or anything, okay? As an example, okay? Simplistic example, but there's a bunch of other examples like that. It will, however, though, they will continue. So in 2023, this is going to zero, this portion here. But this portion here where they're helping with facilities of all sorts, whether it's export terminals or whatever it may be, for Canadian companies to actually ship Canadian product overseas or to a foreign country like the US. Okay, so they're still doing that, and they're expecting to drop that by a measly 15% by 2030. Okay.
Wow.
So
They
not-
stop charging them GST and they're done.
Well, so it's not a very big amount here, and I don't know what the split is between the two pots of money here, but I suspect this pot would be much bigger. But again, it's not the full $7 or $8 billion that they're spending. They're giving some value to these companies, but it's not the full thing because they're getting much of the money back, right? So there's more. COVID stuff. There's a bunch of other stuff. This one here, oil spill response challenge. It's to provide supports to detect oil spills and to increase oil spill recovery rates. Maybe the oil and gas industry should pay for that, but I'm not against that. I think that's it's probably a good investment of money, right? So, so I'll just go to the next one. The other one that's a biggie is it's the Trans Mountain pipeline. Okay, so the initial investment was $6 or $8 billion, I believe, and they're putting more money into it to finish the pipeline. So that is it's a lot of money. Is it a direct subsidy to the industry? What it will do is it will allow the industry to ship product at a lower rate. So it's an indirect subsidy from that perspective. Okay, so it's certainly helping the oil and gas industry, but it's not a direct subsidy, but it's huge amounts of money, right? And I think this is a financial stability. My opinion, I think they're it's going to be a stranded asset, exactly. So okay,
Which is why the government bought it.
well, that's why
That's why industry didn't do it, because they're like, it's gonna be a stranded asset, we don't want that on the books.
when they figured out to be a stranded asset, yeah, they said screw you, I'm not going to do it.
Privatize the profits and socialize the losses.
Exactly. So essentially, so you could look at the slides after and look at all the details, but there are tons and tons of different things that are in there. Some of these, I believe they should be eliminated, but others shouldn't, right? So here, I don't like the helping the gas sector grow, but I like to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions part, right? So, and of course, the oil industry should do it by themselves, but they won't do it by themselves. So I think the government has a role in trying to clean up the industry, at least from an R&D perspective, right? Anything else? Okay, so that's about it. So that's, any questions or comments on any of that? Bottom line is it's a really complicated and really boring as right, as you can imagine, subject, but if you want to know what you should be asking the government to stop doing, it's probably on that list. Instead of saying stop subsidizing, you have specific things to talk about. Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, so now it's my turn. We're gonna talk about CCS to NACS transition. This will be interesting because everyone sort of knows me as being kind of anti-Tesla. It's more anti-Elon, really, for honest, but I apparently do have a reputation in the forums as being negative about Tesla a lot. So I thought we would cover this transition because it's going to be a big deal. And I'm going to start with a bit of history. So in the beginning, probably standing in front of the slides for the people in the room. So in the beginning, there was an absence of standards, right? So the industry was sort of doing its thing and being very slow, as industry tends to be. And I'm just going to move the camera to, there we go. And so Tesla wanted to get to market. They didn't want to wait for all the standards bodies to get their stuff together. So they just decided to roll their own. They wanted the Model S out on the road by 2012. And so they just made their own adapter because they were just like, whatever, we're just going to do it. Which is fine, right? Because nobody else was sort of doing anything. And they've since used it on basically everything they've ever made, right? All the Teslas use the same connector, the supercharger network. They built out their own charging network because nobody else was doing that. So they just sort of power to them and they just did it, right? So kudos to that, right? Like that's, you got to do what you got to do, right? Meanwhile, in industry, there's a bit of a story that I didn't realize was a thing. So it turns out that the J1772 connector, the one that we all are familiar with for home charging non-Teslas, it actually dates back to 2001. And the reason is because, so this is actually fascinating. So prior to 2001, there was a connector called the J1773. And for those of you who are familiar with obscure EVs, namely the RAV4, the Toyota RAV4 EV, the original one, when Toyota made EVs. And there's the
EV1 you said.
Sorry, what's that?
The GM EV1.
The GM EV1, the one who killed the electric car, right? That car. So they used an inductive charger, right? And it was like this paddle, and they would slide it into the charge port. And that was a standard J1773. And so that's what every EV, all three of them, used Because the Chevy S10 apparently had an electric version as well that used it back in the 90s. So there were 3 EVs and they all used this cool paddle thing. And so that was the standard. But CARB in 2001 was thinking forwards because there was a competing standard J70, 72. They're numerically, sequentially named, right? So they were all sort of developed. And they decided, CARB decided, the California Air Resources Board decided that all electric cars starting in 2006 sold in California had to use J1772. Now, why did they do this? Why did they decide on the J1772 conductive connector versus the 1773 inductive connector? And the reason is because conductive is easier, it's cheaper, and it allows vehicle to X capabilities in the future. And so that is why California decided to go and mandate, okay, we're just going to stick with this plug for EVs that is conductive that we all know and love today. And it was all because it was cheaper than the inductive version and it could do vehicle to X. So V to load, vehicle to grid, whatever.
So I think it's really interesting that in 2006, they were thinking about V2X.
They were, yeah, no, that was super cool. So if you're going to accuse CARB of anything, it'll be forward thinking at least. They're definitely doing that. Now, the problems globally, if you're thinking globally, are that in North America, we don't have 3-phase power. We use 2-phase pretty much everywhere. Or sorry, single phase mostly. And so the connector that was adapted for North America was called the Yakazi connector. It's a single phase plug that was designed for the industry. So the way it worked in the olden days is a bunch of car companies would sort of team up together and decide what the standard would be. And it actually kind of works that way nowadays too. And so back then there were some Japanese, like Toyota was involved, Honda was involved, GM and a few others. They had teamed up and they're like, okay, we're going to go with J1772 because CARB says so. And we're going to go with this Yakazi connector because Japan and North America are using single phase power and it's 240 volt and 110 capable. So it can do a level 1 and 2. And we're just going to use that. And so they decided on the design. It's the round one.
Yeah, so it's true that the companies talk together, but
Yeah.
they got SAE to actually.
Yeah, no, so this Society of Automotive Engineers, and actually, so it's a bit more complicated than that because Europe wanted in on the party, and Europe has 3-phase power. And so the standard that North American and Japanese car companies arrived at for the plug connect type it didn't work for Europe because Europe has 3-phase and they needed extra pins. And so what happened was the SAE, the Society of Automotive Engineers, which sort of covers North American car stuff, and the European Automotive Association, which has a different acronym anyway, it'll show up.
Don't they use ISO?
No, they don't. It's not ISO. It's the automotive. It's the Germans basically and the French and some of the Italians got together, and so they're like, okay, well, you guys are using your Yakazi connector. We are going to use our NACS connector, which is the Type 2 connector. So they became known as Type 1, Type 2, basically, is a short story. So we have different plugs for North America and Europe for AC power. So that's just AC power. That's level 1 and level 2 when you plug into your house because we have different power here, right? We're 110, Europe's 240, yada, yada, yada. Okay, so 1772 has 2 versions because North America and Europe are different, right? Okay, cool, got it. So then they were like, okay, well, that's great. We've covered the home charging part and we've covered the, up to 19 kilowatts type of speeds. But what if we want to go faster? How do you charge faster, right? And that's when the SAE and the ACEA, which is the European Automotive Association, figure out that acronym. It's probably in French. So they developed a plan to take J1772 to fast charge. And the way they were going to do that is they're going to add 2 common pins to the bottom of the connector so that it would enable fast charging, so that you could use the existing connector plus 2 pins to get your fast charge on. Right, and so that became known as the combined charging system.
So why 2 pins?
2 pins, positive, negative.
But it's direct current.
And it's direct current. Yeah, well, DC fast charge, right? So direct current, positive, negative. And so that became CCS, and now we have Type 1, Type 2, right? With me so far? Cool. And the first CCS station was supposed to be introduced in 2012, Model S time, right? But as usual, it's delayed. And so what didn't get built until 2013, and the first station was put up in Volkswagen so they could test the E-Up, interestingly enough. So that's the Volkswagen E-Up, never came to Canada. Cute little hatchback, really cool, people love it. Great. So that was the first CCS station. So as you can see, like Tesla was ahead of this. They were a year ahead. They wanted these Model S's out on the roads already. They wanted to start building their supercharger, and they weren't going to wait for CCS to become a thing, right? So they did their own, right? Because like whatever, industry is ridiculous. And plus, most of the industry probably hated Tesla because they're a startup, and who cares what Tesla says? Because back in those days, Tesla was just this like sketchy little. They made one car, and it was really expensive, and you know they made a few hundred of them, and then stopped. And
Like Lucid today.
right, like Lucid today, right? And so the industry was sort of like, whatever, Tesla, we don't care what you're doing.
You don't even Lucid it now. You didn't.
Yeah.
Made them parts of it.
So yeah, so
Like Faraday Futura, Terra.
yeah, exactly. So they were the sketchy startup. The industry didn't want to work with them. None of the parts suppliers wanted to work with Tesla. Tesla was sort of doing its own thing out in the wilderness. So whatever, it was fine. So this is what the industry came up with: CCS 1 and 2. Does your fast charging. Japan, interesting enough, they still use the J1772 for AC, but they decided to roll their own DC connector because I guess the Japanese didn't want to work with the Europeans. So they ended up on the CHAdeMO standard, which is completely separate, and it's not even a share plug or anything. So Japan's got its own thing. So now you've got 3 fast charge standards depending on where in the world you live, which just made things even more fun and confusing. Anyway, by Tesla rolling its own standard, that allowed them to do a more reliable and custom-made for them charging network, right? Which is why it works so well. Until 2023, right? Until this year, a couple of weeks ago, until the last meeting that we had. So if you remember, in the last meeting, so we'll continue the story this meeting. So last month we announced that in the news, was the last news item, that Ford had said, you know what, we're going to go with NACS, screw CCS, and it shocked the industry. Well, things have changed a lot since then. So on May 25th, Ford announced they'd go to NACS, and then a week later, GM was like, hey, you know what, we're going to go to NACS too. And now Rivian has joined, and Aptera had already been on NACS because Aptera, but nobody cares about Aptera because they don't have cars yet. And Hyundai Kia is thinking about it, and Mercedes-Benz is thinking about it, and Lucid is thinking about it. And what's holding them up is the higher voltage architecture. So they're just waiting on Tesla to say, yep, we can do 1,000 volts. And so that's what's happening in North America, right? Is that everyone's now moving to NACS. Europe, they're not. And the reason they're sticking with CCS in Europe is because Europe has their shit together. I have to delete that on YouTube. And in 2014, they declared that everybody in Europe that sells cars that are electric need to use CCS Type 2, and they just made it a thing. So if you go to Europe, you buy a Model 3, it has a CCS connector. It doesn't have the Tesla one, because Europe can govern, apparently. But for us, it was a mess. It was still a mess. We all know this, right? Tesla has their own, CCS has everyone else. And now that is changing. So there are some challenges. It's not going to be smooth sailing. But objectively, CCS is probably dead. And the reason that Ford and GM have jumped ship is because Ford, when they released the F-150, they wanted their customers to like experience, you know, a good experience with EVs, right? And they make a lot of F-150s. Like F-150 is the biggest selling vehicle in North America, period, right? And so if they're going all electric, they want to make sure that their customers have, you know, good charging networks. And so they sent out these Ford ambassadors, and they would go to the charging stations. And they partnered up with Electrify Canada and Electrify America, which are the Volkswagen Group's pennants for Dieselgate. And those are all CCS charging stations, right? And so Ford sent these ambassadors out because they were hearing that, you know, charging's not great if you're not a Tesla, and you know, and so they wanted to just make sure that, you know, when you bought a Ford truck or a Mach-E, that you could charge it somewhere. And apparently, when their ambassadors reported back, it wasn't great. And so what Ford has decided is that, you know what, we're not going to depend on Volkswagen to make good chargers. So we're going to go with a known company that's known good, and that's Tesla, and standards be damned. And so that's why Ford jumped ship, and I imagine GM had similar board meetings with similar conclusions. And now they've jumped ship too, because if Ford's doing it, we can do it too. And so now everyone's sort of going to the connector that has proven to be more reliable and a network that is proven reliable. But we'll have some cautionary notes here before we all get too excited about switching to
The
NACS.
sector's not proven to be more reliable, to be fair.
This is true. The network is, so the experience, it's, we'll talk about that in a minute. But the experience for the users thus far to date is that everyone knows Teslas always work. They have tons of charging stalls. Everyone raves about Tesla charging. CCS world, there's a lot of stalls spread out. They're not all in the same spot, which is kind of okay. But there, most people roll up and there's at least one that's down, right? Coventry, the 350 has been down for months and hasn't been fixed, right? And these are problems, and these are legitimate problems. It's not necessarily the connector's fault, but it's the network and the whole infrastructure around its fault. And so Ford is looking at this and saying, look, we're just going to go with the one that seems to be fine all the time, right? And whatever. So the first issue is that there are no known legal agreements in place yet with Tesla on the standard. So, I mean, that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just early days, they don't disclose everything. So there could be legal agreements in place. We just don't know about them. But it's something to like, okay, so they've said this on Twitter, but how real is this decision? Like 2 years is a long time, right? They're going to switch over in 2025. Is that for real? For real? Like, have they signed contracts, or are they just talking about things on Twitter? Is it a bluff? Are they just scaring the other charging networks into making better charging? Which would be good too if they decided like next year, oh, never mind, we're going to stick with CCS. But now Electrify Canada has like fixed all their chargers, right? That could be a play that's happening right now. Probably not, but you never know. The other thing that a lot of Tesla fans might not think about is that this change means that Tesla will have to give up control of the precious Tesla connector, which they call NACS, to a third-party group, right? And the reason they will need to give up control is because if they want it to truly become an actual industry standard, then the industry has to be in charge of it. Because there is no company on earth that makes cars that will be okay with Tesla having the reins of the connector and the software and the protocols so that their car is subordinate to a Tesla. And they don't want to be in a situation where if they get in a legal beef with Tesla or they make a cheaper thing that Tesla doesn't like, that Tesla can just do some stuff in software and disable that thing, right? So they don't want to have that situation. So that's why chances are Tesla will have to relinquish control of NACS to something like Charin. Charin is the current industry standards body for charging, and they control CCS.
Charin is not independent, they're part of.
Well, it's an industry body, so like the car companies are part of it. They're all members of this organization.
Is it through ISO or SAE or probably ISO?
I don't know the details.
It's more that Charin has a mandate of promoting.
Yes.
They don't exactly ratify the standards, so there's SAE still involved.
Yeah, and ISO is involved and stuff, but Charin is basically the steering committee for CCS, and the automakers all have a vote.
So Charin is about interoperability.
Yes, and they're the ones that say, okay, guys, here's what we're going to do with CCS. Okay, you guys want 350 kilowatt chargers? Okay, here's how that's going to happen for everybody, right? So Charin's the steering committee, and so something like that will have to. They may even take on the NACS connector, and the reason they might take it on is A, they're already doing it with CCS, so it's kind of a logic fit, and B, the NACS connector will have to speak CCS, and I'll get into that in a second. So yeah, right now, the CCS standard isn't just the form factor of the plug, it's also the language the car speaks to the charger, right? The computers have to talk, right? And there's protocols involved, so the handshake and let the charging flow and let money go back and forth or whatever the case may be if, in the case of plug and charge. And so right now on CCS cars, the car speaks CCS as sort of the language. In Tesla land, it's a little different. The early Teslas, the Model S and X, and some Model 3s speak a proprietary Tesla protocol. And then later, when the Model 3 went to Europe, they had to teach the Tesla Model 3 and subsequent Y and new S's and all that. They had to update the hardware. They had to update the hardware to speak CCS. And now in North America, there's a mix where you have newer Model 3s and Ys speak CCS. And you know this because if you own a Model 3 or a Model Y, and you want to get the CCS adapter, some cars, some of the Model 3s, the earlier builds and the Model Ys aren't able to use it. And this is why. It's because they don't speak CCS natively. They speak the proprietary Tesla protocol. And the Model S and X also speak the Tesla protocol. So the Tesla charging stalls are actually bilingual, if you will, right? But if NACS is going to become the true standard, chances are Tesla's not going to give up the proprietary Tesla protocol. They're going to have to adopt NACS or CCS, sorry, for everything. So that means new superchargers will all need to speak CCS natively. And that means that some old Model S's might have issues in the future, but they might not even be on the road at that point.
Yeah, so I think what will happen is with the Tesla superchargers, they'll they'll talk to the car and figure out whether they speak CCS or not.
Yeah.
And that'll work. But if a Tesla car wants to go to another NACS connector that's non-CCS, then it will have to be able to.
Yeah, so you might get into a situation where like your 10-year-old Model S
It won't work.
might roll up to a future NACS Electrify Canada charger and it won't be able to work.
Yeah.
Right, so you might have issues like that in the future. But that's just something to keep in mind. Yeah, covered that. The other issue with the chargers, that is what is holding back Hyundai and Lucid right now. And they've admitted this. They actually, Hyundai just had an investor day and they talked about this stuff. They are waiting on a high power Tesla stall, right? The V4 is rumored to have 1,000 volts. And so they're currently not going to commit to NACS until it can support at least 800 volt architecture. Because currently the superchargers only support 400 volts, which is fine for most EVs, but the newer generations of EVs are 800 volts, which means you can have more power for less current, basically, is the idea. Higher voltage means you can push the same amount of power with lower current kind of stuff. So it really enables faster charging, but GM and Ford are also going to 800 volts. So I'm betting that the V4 chargers, once Tesla confirms that they're 1,000 volts, then everyone will switch over to.
So the Cybertruck and.
Yeah, because the Cybertruck's supposed to be like 800 or 900 volts. It's like a weird one.
800 or 1,000.
Yeah, so.
But all the current Tesla vehicles, all of them are 400.
They're all 400 volts, right? And so this is what is holding back some automakers from joining the party. So once the V4s are confirmed, then we'll know. There's currently only one V4 charger. It's in the Netherlands, and it's a test charger, and it only does 250 kilowatts, which is not 800 volts or 1,000 volts. So,
Well, it could be.
it could be derated, but we don't know, and so they're waiting on Tesla to confirm. And there's more challenges. So as every Tesla driver knows, where is the charge port? It's the driver's side rear quarter, which is fine if it's a car or an SUV, probably, because that's usually sort of where the gas ports go. But if it's a pickup truck, that's not fine. And the reason it's not fine is because of the type of things in the picture here. Pickup trucks aren't always pickup trucks with the box, right? Some of them are tow trucks. Some of them have work stuff on them, right? Some of them are flatbeds, right? And so trucks, the only thing you can guarantee to have on a truck platform is the cab, right? Which means for a truck, the charge port has to be somewhere on the front of the vehicle, not the rear left corner. And so that means that either truck makers are going to have to figure out a way of putting a charge port back where Tesla puts it, or the Tesla chargers are going to have to figure out how to have longer cables, because right now, even Ford F-150 users won't be able to use the existing superchargers because the cables are physically too short. They don't reach where the charge port is on the F-150.
But they won't be able to park in the park.
So they won't be able to park correctly, and they'll have to block things. Like you can make it fit, right? You can fit a square peg into a round hole, but it won't be elegant, and they're going to have to cross park and use up 3 stalls or whatever. Like there are issues with that. So Tesla is going to have to figure that out and maybe relinquish the left side rear corner.
So you didn't talk about the Magic Dock
And the Magic Dock, yeah, I haven't mentioned that.
So putting the charge port in the front right would also solve the problem.
That would solve the problem if it goes in, but then trailers.
When I was looking through Tesla's NACS document, they never mentioned charge port location, so it doesn't look like they're going to try and enforce that.
No, it's probably not something that they would enforce.
Longer cables at the V4 station, so
Yeah.
everything's supposedly going to be solved at the V4 stations.
Yeah.
The problem is, it'll take some time to retrofit the older stations. To
Absolutely. So this is not an impossible engineering problem. This isn't a roadblock. It's just something. It's a bump in the road that Tesla's going to have to figure out. So it's not going to be like I'm just saying it's not smooth sailing, right?
And plus others could deal with it separately.
Yep.
anyways.
Yep, they can put on the nose. The best place is right on the front of
But
it.
the other charger,
No,
charging providers can do whatever they want, right?
But anyway,
Do that.
Or a longer cable.
or a longer cable, but then the cable management becomes a problem,
But
right?
I
And
mean,
it
the
breaks.
existing CTS, they're dealing with that because the existing
Well, this is it.
CTS depends on the car where it is, right?
Well,
So, but they
yeah,
have-
so the CCS stations, like a lot of things that people like about the superchargers is that they're very elegant design, they're very clean and minimalist, and the cable management is fantastic. But the reason the cable management is fantastic is because every single car that uses that stall has a charge port in the exact same space, so they can tailor the cable length to the car. My point is that that's going to have to change. Your superchargers in the future might have to look more like existing CCS stations.
Yes, but my point is the existing CCS stations already deal with that.
Poorly is the problem. Right?
Okay.
And that is the issue, right? So one of the issues with CCS stations is that they're broken. And one of the common reasons that they're broken is because of cable management or poor cable management, where the cable's just on the ground and then a snowplow rips it off, or it's dangled, or it's crimped, or it's bent, or it's like cut, or right there, or people like stretch it and then it breaks. Like there's so many things that can go wrong with poor cable management, which Tesla avoids by having a very elegant design. But this is going to be a challenge, right? So
One of the things that they have to think about is towing. I mean, when I've pulled the EVX trailer there, I charged it at the Canadian Tire there.
Yeah.
I took up 4 stalls.
yeah, so Tesla's already solved the towing issue, at least in a lot of places, probably not around Ottawa, but they do have pull-through superchargers. So it looks like a gas station, basically. The stalls are in an island and you just sort of pull up next to it. So that's not a super difficult situation to solve.
And for
But-
future reference, what you could do if the last stall is available, you use the last stall,
Yeah.
park beside it, so you're right beside the, right?
It's intermittent's a problem, but yeah.
Yeah.
You're right.
Because what I had to do, I went there with the trailer once, I unhooked the trailer.
Yeah.
I charged,
Yeah.
and I hooked the trailer.
All right, so
The pain.
There was one other person who wanted to even charge the time I was there, so it didn't matter.
one of the other roadblocks or bumps is vehicle to load. A lot of car companies are starting to put that on. It's extremely useful. And this is where the Elon Musk factor gets a little into the conversation. He has gone on the record as basically saying he sees no future in V2X. Nobody wants to plug their car into their house because they can just buy a Powerwall instead. And so this might be an issue for companies like Hyundai Kia that already have deployed cars with vehicle to load capability, which is supported in the J1772. You remember one of the reasons CARB chose 1772 was because it enabled this ability, right? And so switching to NACS, these companies aren't going to want to give that up, right? Ford famously, the F-150 can power your house for days, right? Ford is not going to give that up easily. So there must be a solution here that isn't publicly announced yet, but presumably if Ford has signed on, then they've obviously agreed to something. But this is where Elon Musk is a wild card, right? I've already mentioned they'll have to give up the standards. They'll need to open source the communications protocols and authentication and payment and stuff. So everyone loves the plug and play thing with the Tesla. That protocol has to be opened up, or else like other charging networks won't be able to use it, right? And you won't be able to do that.
So the agreement with Ford actually includes that.
So that is with Ford, but what I'm saying is that if other charging networks want to use it, like Flow or Electrify Canada, those protocols have to be open so that they can use it too, or else it falls apart, and then you're just going to have another CCS with a different plug shade, right? Which is kind of what the industry doesn't want to have happen. All right, so things that I do like about NACS, because it is a good connector, right? It's obviously easier to use. It's more elegant. It's a much better design. It's more user friendly. It doesn't have the error modes that a CCS plug does. CCS has a latch on the handle that has to engage, and if it doesn't engage, then it won't allow charging and stuff. That's all gone in the NACS connectors. They have a much more sophisticated and elegant solution to that is less prone to faults.
Just say something about that. So you were saying earlier that the connector wasn't much of a problem, but it actually is. A lot of the CCS connectors the latching mechanism gets broken.
It gets broken, that's the problem.
With the Tesla one, with the Tesla one, what happens is when you put it into the port, there's something inside.
Yeah, it's on the car side.
Locks it in,
I know
right?
that.
So it's a lot more elegant.
But there are, like.
Well, we can talk about this at the
I
end.
do think NACS is better. I'm just trying to be fair here to CCS.
Yes.
And like I have a J7072 Grizzly charger at home and it has the metal the tabs are metal.
Yep.
Okay, so it's not.
No, it's not an impossible problem. It's just a lot of the implementations with J7072 cheap out, use plastic brakes, or the metal they use is like the shitty kind that falls apart or the springs come out and then it breaks. If you go to IKEA, you'll see what I'm talking about. Two of their J7070 plugs don't
Yeah,
even,
are not working or.
right? So
Three, actually.
there's three, yeah. See, case in point, right? But standardizing around a single connector will absolutely help the industry, right? The faster we do this, the better. And if everyone's going to NACS, then I just dive in. Everyone do it immediately as quickly as possible. Adapters are going to be needed for non-NACS vehicles. That's relatively simple. There are already adapters going the other way from CCS to NACS. So the NACS and CCS shouldn't be difficult. Retrofit kits probably won't be a thing. And the reason they won't be a thing is because CCS has separate pins for AC and DC power, whereas NACS combines the two pins and there's a switch inside the car that determines where the high voltage goes versus the AC current. So that would be a bit more involved than just switching out a plate with a different shape. So you probably won't be able to upgrade an existing CCS car to NACS, but an adapter isn't a big deal. They're not very big. They're not like the ridiculous Chatham adapter that Tesla came out with years ago. They're relatively cheap. Third party, if this opens up, becomes a standard, third party will take that on and build a $150 version or whatever. Because it's literally just a form factor change and maybe a bit of rewiring pins.
So
There is a risk though. And one of the risks is that in the future, NACS cars with, it had to do, I think you brought it up,
Yeah,
Lawrence,
so-
where it's like you're plugging into an AC port that looks like NACS.
It's an issue that will probably result in people frying their charge.
Yes, they'll
I
fry
think
them.
that's probably the worst outcome that will come of
Yeah.
it, but it's not great, right, because a car.
Come up here and talk to the people, Lawrence. We'll bring you on camera. This
Right.
is Lawrence. He's very good at this.
So, okay, potential safety issue, or maybe not too much of a safety issue, but could fry your onboard charger, right? So, those Tesla tap converters you can get? So they're not meant for fast charging, they're meant for converting a Tesla destination charger, which is a level 2 charger,
AC,
to J7072.
which is all.
It doesn't have the CCS DC pins on it. Okay? So if you plug that into a CCS car, and then you plug it into a NACS charging station that speaks the CCS protocol, so in the future, Electrify Canada will probably have these. And a layperson easily do this, okay? Because
It looks the same. It's the same plug, right? The plug is the plug.
it's a plug, it fits in the car.
What's the problem?
Why would it work? Okay, so people are absolutely gonna do this. And you plug it in, and then the what's used on J7072 is the control pilot pin for communication, and all it is a signal that's turning on and off, called pulse width modulation, and it changes the amount of percentage of time that is on versus off to signal what amperage you can draw. So it's a really, really dumb, simple protocol, but it's great because it's reliable. And that's why level 2 chargers always work. And CCS is much more complicated. CCS uses power line communication. Basically, it just puts a radio signal through that control pilot pin. Okay, so what happens is Tesla's NACS connector has the same pin out as J7072. Well, except for the DC part. But so the other pin is proximity pilot. It lets the car know if something's plugged into it or not. Same on J7072 and NACS. So what'll happen is your converter is just rewiring your control pilot to the control pilot on J7072.
So on the diagram here,
So the
it's
car-
PP and CP. See on the
Yeah.
diagram on the slide.
Exactly. So the NACS station will be putting its communication through the CP line, and then that's going to get passed through the converter with no interference because the inverter is just dumb. It's connecting the pins together. And so the car will think that it's plugged into a CCS station, and the NACS station will think that it's plugged into a CCS car. So what happens before the car actually starts charging is the isolation test. So when the isolation test is done, if it was a CCS car would have contactors that isolate the battery from the actual charger. And so the contactor would still be open, so no electricity would be able to flow between the charger and the battery. And so then the battery, or the charger puts out a high voltage in order to make sure that energy is not leaking out of the system. And so normally
It's just a pulse of high voltage.
pulse of high voltage wouldn't go anywhere. And it's not supposed to go anywhere. If it does go anywhere, the charging station will know, and then it'll be like,
No.
no error, we're not charging today.
Yeah.
Instead, what will happen is that that pulse of DC electricity is going to get sent straight into the car's onboard charger. Because
The AC charger, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
And
Instead of
what
the battery.
most likely happen is that the AC charger will just pop.
So my understanding is that first current descent, it's voltage, high voltage, but it's very
Super low current.
Well, okay, let's clear up some misunderstanding here about how voltages and currents work.
Fine.
Current is determined by voltage. You can't just say, I'm putting out this voltage at a low current. The way that actually works is you'll have a current limiting circuit. The way current limiting works is you're constantly monitoring the current, and then you're dropping the voltage in order to hit a target current. So when you say, oh, this relates to the whole people saying you don't get killed by high voltages, you get killed by the current. No, it's both. That's like saying that you don't get killed by jumping off a building, you get killed by hitting the ground. Like, no, it's both. Anyway, just clear the conception. So yes, the charger is sending out that voltage. If there is anything in its path that can absorb that voltage,
It will.
a current will be drawn. That's just how it works. I don't know how long the pulse of energy goes out for the isolation test, but it's probably like a second or something like that, which is long enough.
Milliseconds, probably.
It's probably more than milliseconds. I don't know.
Yeah. Doesn't matter.
Like if I was engineering it, I'd probably give it enough time to monitor and see what happens. So I don't know exactly how long it is, but it's probably long enough to damage something. And the thing is, I've been thinking about this the last couple of days. I don't think there's much that anyone can do to prevent this from happening, because the car, there's not enough communication pins or anything, in order for the car to be able to tell what's happening. Unless the Tesla tap converter itself has something on it that's
Like a fuse or something.
or well, no, the fuse wouldn't help. But if it had
Breaker.
no, a breaker wouldn't help, because even if you broke at a certain amperage, that might not save the onboard charger. Because it's getting hit by a much higher voltage than it's used to. So even if it's
So there would need to be some circuitry to figure it out.
well,
I mean, we don't have to engineer this today.
there's
But I think the moral of the story is don't buy the Chinese knockoff adapter
Yeah,
when
so-
these things come out.
So this is something I'm sure when, will come out and.
Very smart people are working on this, so I'm sure somebody will come up with some protective circuitry.
Or there'll be some warnings that.
Yeah.
Don't
I mean,
exist.
certainly when I bought my adapter, it's expressly said
Yeah.
right on it, do not use that supercharger.
Right.
Like-
Yeah, but I mean, people will try things, right? So you got to engineer for the dumbest bear, the smartest bear.
If you did use it as a supercharger, probably nothing would happen. Until now, because now they're gonna start updating superchargers to support CCS. So if you try plugging it into
So a lot of
CCS
the chargers already support CCS. So I don't know. We'll
yeah, but only the Magic Dock ones actually allow you to.
you charge off of it. Yeah, so we'll see. It'll be interesting.
It'll be
Yeah.
something to follow, because it could be a significant issue.
So the moral of the story is don't buy knockoff adapters in the future.
That might
starting
not even save you to use the brand name one. We don't know. Someone has to test it.
And yeah, someone will have to figure that out. Are there any questions either from the room or even online? If you guys want to unmute and ask me something, you can do that too.
I like Mike that's tried in this car.
No,
I like Mike that's in this car.
hard pass. Tommy, you have a question?
The NACS how does the NACS plug not fall out of the car?
The NACS plug, not, it's pretty deep, and there is a pin that the car puts up into it to hold it there.
Yeah, it's like a half circle thing.
Yeah.
And when you put it in, inside the charging station, there's something that comes in.
And holds it there, which is a lot more, it's a lot more robust and reliable than the CCS solution, which is a button that's sort of a levered pin. It's just a hook. It's very simple and primitive. And they break all the time. Just go to IKEA, you'll see.
Yeah, if you drop the connector.
Drop the connector, and there's like a little spring in there, and if that spring gets loose, good luck with that.
But to answer his question, how would it just a CCS car?
Like,
Like it's an adapter, then you need.
So the CCS, the NACS to CCS adapter that does not yet exist will need some sort of latch mechanism that mimics what the current CCS J72 latch does. So you'll plug the NACS thing into a hole, and then the big honking CCS plug will go into the car, but there will need to be some sort of latch, because that latch is actually checked by the car before charging can start, so that you can't just like rip out a charger halfway through its DC fast charge session, because the arcing would be hilarious and probably deadly. And so that latch is actually super useful, like super important. So that whatever adapter comes out will need to have that built in somehow. And that will be prone to break as well, because it's a bad design.
But going forward, assuming NACS,
Yeah, so the new cars will all come NACS native starting 2025, so it won't be an issue. It's just a transition issue for current CCS cars and the next year's cars too. Because starting 2025, apparently, they'll just be native NACS going forward, and then it won't be a problem. So it's just us literally that have to worry about it that don't own Teslas. Any other questions from online? Anybody want to jump in? No? No, we'll just move on. Ryan's not here. Do we want to skip his?
is he online? Maybe?
Ryan, are you online?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, you're here.
Yeah.
Do you want me to,
Driver?
I'll drive for you. How's that?
I just want to make a comment. I thought it'll be interesting to see with interoperability testing that will have to go on, like with CCS cars and the NACS connector and whatnot. I mean,
Yeah.
if you see the mess that's going on right now with CCS and like Electrify America and particularly the Island 5. And there's, I don't know, I've heard some theories that it's maybe software or some other.
It's so complicated. There's so many
Yeah, it
variables.
makes me wonder
Yeah.
if all of that will make the Tesla network look bad.
Well, and that's the thing. That's a risk, right? Is that we might just be moving our hot mess onto the Tesla network, and then it'll just drag them down with us.
But hopefully,
But hopefully it's not the case. Hopefully,
whoever takes over the
Yeah.
next stuff, actually put some, a bit more discipline in there, because
Yeah.
there's a video of, I think it's EVCO, those chargers, and the guy was explaining all the challenges that he had with importing different vehicles. And essentially every single level 3 CCS combo charger has to be tested against every single model.
yeah, individually,
That works, right?
which might happen to CCS. NACS.
And actually, there's some good developments there, so, Carin is releasing an interoperability testing product. So it's like a benchmark thing, so you can plug it into a car and then it will run automated testing. And then you can plug it into a
Nice.
charger and it'll run automated testing, so you don't have to plug every charger into every car. Also, all the car manufacturers and all the charger manufacturers recently, like last month, got together at a conference. And they drove from booth to booth and tested all the cars.
Cool.
So like they're fixing it.
So they're working on it. I mean, it's an engineering problem, right? The other thing that I didn't mention, and I'll just mention quickly before Ryan gets going. Sorry, Ryan. And it's a bit more insidious, is that a lot of the charging networks that are adopting NACS, and I'll talk about them in the news, they've all kind of hinted or indicated or said outright that they will be, for the time being, replacing the CHAdeMO plugs on all the stations with NACS. So the first people to really suffer from this transition will be the CHAdeMO people, because those are the easy, low-hanging fruit for charging operators to just swap out with NACS. Because if they want to support NACS, nobody uses CHAdeMO versus Teslas.
And we can't even get adapters.
And
We don't talk to the gentleman.
so just if you have a Leaf and
The early adopters.
Yeah.
so if
And in your case with the.
yeah, so the older souls, but mostly the Leaf people, will probably be the people to suffer the most from this transition, because they're still using CHAdeMO for whatever reason.
The Mitsubishi Outlander.
Yeah, but that's a gas car. You can just, the fast station for a plug-in hybrid is called a gas station. So anyway, we'll let Ryan do his thing. So Ryan,
Steve has his hand up.
okay, sorry, Steve, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I put in the chat, David Booth, AKA Motormouth, wrote a really interesting article. And for those that don't know David Booth, he doesn't like electric vehicles and he particularly doesn't like Tesla, but it's a really interesting article. And a lot of points brought up here about this are in that. So it's an interesting read. I thought I'd just let everybody know if they haven't already taken a look at the chat. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks. All right, Ryan, take it away, bud.
Cool. All right. I'll do an audio check. Does everybody hear me okay?
We do, yes.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay. So this could be a little bit old news for some people. Plugshare, through their Plugshare research arm on behalf of CAA, conducted the largest EV owner survey in Canadian history, according to them. So they researched just over 16,000 EV and PHEV owners, so kind of last winter. I have a feeling I participated in this. Based on some of the data, I feel like I remember answering questions about it. So what we'll do is we'll go through, I pulled out some kind of interesting points, and then I'll paste a link to their release about it in the chat. Okay, so I think this one won't be much of a surprise, especially amongst our little group here, but how likely are you to buy an EV again? Extremely high. So between the extremely likely and likely answers, that accounted for 97% of the respondents, which is pretty amazing for any product, really. And what was interesting is they also pointed out that there wasn't a significant difference between BEV and PHEV or by province. So it's kind of uniform. The PHEV, I think, was just a little bit slightly less. And you could think of someone like me who just recently moved from a PHEV to an EV. Yeah, I'd probably not recommend a PHEV in most cases, but would certainly recommend my EV. So they put together kind of 3 key ownership experience dimensions and asked a bunch of questions based on them. So driving enjoyment, operation cost, quietness of ride, and you can see the breakdowns here, how EVs certainly have, EV is better or EV is somewhat better. They have much more favorable responses than a PHEV, and then compared to gasoline vehicles, certainly smoking them, no pun intended, in this survey. It's interesting to see some of these operation cost, how 5% of people said that a gas vehicle is much better. They didn't really break that down a ton, but I'd be interested to see what exactly led people to think that gas vehicles that was PHEVs, but it's kind of interesting.
If you looked at your monthly payment as part of it, if I'm paying $1,200 for an electric vehicle versus $500 for a gas vehicle, and I'm not driving, if I'm only driving 3,000 kilometers a year, then I'm not seeing all these savings.
Yeah, that's a very good point, Craig. Yeah. All right. Next slide.
There we go.
All right. So Net Promoter Score. I use this at work. I work in software, and we survey our clients quarterly to see if they would recommend our product on a scale of we do 0 to 10, and then that translates into a -100 to 100. And I can tell you that this is probably one of the highest NPS scores I've ever seen for any product ever. 87 NPS score. The absolute best you can get here is 100. So 87 in general for BEVs, a little bit less for PHEVs, which I don't think is much of a surprise for our group anyways. And something I pointed out here too is that they specifically highlighted that Tesla owners gave a higher score of 91. And I think we'll see in the next couple of slides why that likely is. So this one's kind of interesting. So I said these are things that we commonly answer in questions at our events online, kind of fight against some of the FUD out there. It's similar trends to BEV and PHEV. They do have a separate chart for PHEV, but I thought I'd just kind of point out EV. So basically, along the bottom, you'll see that there's a bunch of different potential concerns that you may have before you buy an EV or PHEV, and then afterwards. In all cases, even for PHEVs, after owning, all the scores dropped. So basically, it's kind of going to prove that the concerns that we consistently hear and probably even had ourselves when we bought our first EV really don't come to fruition. Now, one that I crudely highlighted here, I think is no surprise to us, is that before owning, 66% reported that there's a serious or moderately serious concern about not enough public chargers. You can see that it did not enjoy the same drop post-purchase as all the other indicators. So I mean, right there, that's what we always talk about, is we need better charging infrastructure. And I mean, Mike's last presentation, hopefully this NACS thing helps resolve this, or at least push the industry better. The one that had the most significant drop that I thought was really cool was battery degradation. So 54% of pre-purchase concerns, and that dropped to 13%, which is pretty incredible. Okay, so public DC fast charging. So I don't think I put in a slide about level 2 and just decided to focus on this, and especially given Mike's presentation too. So no surprise here, clearly work to be done for a fast charging network in Canada. And then I did say that it is similar feedback for level 2, although there's a little bit more satisfaction for level 2, and I suspect that's the case. That's because you have them installed at home, they're available at stores and things like that. So you can see here charger reliability. You can see that 66% of EV owners are actually satisfied with the charger reliability. Location convenience, speed of charger 75, which I thought was kind of interesting. Location safety. I've been reading a few articles where people put out questions and say, have you ever felt unsafe charging? And I think, in a lot of cases, these are put in business parking lots or things like that where they're well lit. So that's not so surprising. But so I think, the things that we need to improve upon is location convenience, charger reliability. And then you can see that even ease of payment, there's still about,
Ryan, not that I want to sell a ton about the next slides, but most EV owners are men, right? So the reports I've heard of people feeling unsafe are mostly for women, right? So so perhaps it doesn't quite show the reality because it's mostly men right now that own EV.
But also I think it ties into location convenience as well, because a lot of fast chargers are in the back end of some random parking lot in the middle of a business park, right? It's not great, but
So to me, I don't feel unsafe, but I'm not too happy about the location maybe, but But a lot of women would feel very unsafe if it's not lit properly or if it's isolated.
Also be interesting to compare to the US, because I know I watch a lot of American YouTubers and location safety is huge for them. I guess the US is a lot sketchier than Canada, so.
And I would be interested to find out, or see a breakdown of this data across Canada. Because I've had the experience of going to Quebec and chargers are like water over there.
Yeah, that's great. All right, next slide, Ryan.
If I could actually just go back to the location safety, one of the problems with the NACS standard is there is no ability to sort of eject the cable. Like you have to get out of the car and sort of physically remove the cable. And it's one of the complaints is that if you feel unsafe, like you can hit unlock the charge port, but then you can't drive away until you've actually removed the cable.
So that sounds like an enhancement request for Tesla.
Yes.
Right?
All right, Ryan, carry on.
Yeah, sure. So I think maybe Ford and GM and the others had looked at this data on this slide when deciding to switch to NACS. Tesla owners, they broke out because Tesla owners, the data was just significantly different compared to non-Tesla owners, right? And I mean, it just goes to show how much further ahead the supercharger network is. So you can see over on the left-hand side, I put up two charts here. I prefer taking long trips in my gas or hybrid vehicle than in my EV. You can see that Tesla owners overwhelmingly said no. And then on the flip side, non-Tesla EV owners, the majority preferred to take their gas or hybrid vehicle on a long trip. So that's something that needs to flip for sure. Over on the right-hand side, I am confident I can always find a public DC fast charging station when taking a long trip in my EV. Pretty much it's just flipped here. So 69% of Tesla owners agree, but only 44% of non-Tesla owners agree. Okay, so this is similar to a question that I heard asked about breakdown by province, more so about the location and safety. But you can see the confidence in the charging network broken out by province. I think if you surveyed our room before seeing this data, quite a few of us would have been able to guess which province is leading. So you can definitely see the effects of Quebec and BC. Ontario, oddly enough, rated higher than I expected. But I think that's just a population thing. But it just goes to show you that the governments who have been putting money and promotion into electric vehicles and investing in the infrastructure, it's bearing fruit right here.
Yeah, I'm a bit surprised, Ryan, that Ontario's that high, like you say.
Yeah.
Because the infrastructure is getting much better, but in BC, it's my understanding is it's very similar to Quebec.
I wonder, the stats person in me is wondering how they weighted the provinces, because I wonder if the reason Ontario is the national average is because we're the biggest population.
Well, he's got the
You can
numbers.
see the response rates though.
Yeah, so
But I don't know how they weighted them, right?
well, there's actually more in British Columbia that responded in Ontario.
Yeah, but I mean, that doesn't talk about the weighting of them, so I feel like maybe Ontario is the average just because we have the most people, so we just sort of set the average and then everyone else is compared to it.
This is also for fast charging, eh? Not level 2 and lower.
Yeah.
BC has a lot of level 2 charging.
A lot of level 2 charging?
Yeah, BC.
Oh, okay, not that much level 3?
Well, I've seen a lot more level 2 than
Okay.
level 3, but mind you, not the expert. I'm always here, guys.
In Ontario, it could be that chargers are more concentrated.
Yeah,
Like you've got
Toronto.
large population centers where they have
Yeah.
good reliable chargers.
Yeah.
Smaller
I
towns.
mean, like half the country lives in Ontario, so.
Yeah.
Well, half of Ontario lives around Toronto.
All right.
So this one likely, again, a lot of this, we're in our little bubble, so there's a lot of stuff that may not be so surprising to us, but more single family homeowners purchase EVs, and I think that has a lot to do, and we'll see when we get into demographics too. I think it's just more, because of the higher upfront cost of an EV, there's a little bit of a skewing of the data just by income and disposable income and things like that too, right? Now, what was interesting to me is I thought this would have been higher, but it says 1 in 5 EV drivers in multi-unit dwellings have no home charging. I thought that would have been, 50% maybe or more based on what we hear from people asking about their condos getting things installed and stuff like that. So I was
Yeah, Ryan, what I'm hearing is a lot of people are not getting EVs because they don't have charging, right?
No, but he's saying of the EV owners, only.
Yeah, I know. But I know what he's saying, but my point is, maybe it's because most of the people
Oh,
actually
yeah.
buying EV.
It's a skewed sample, right?
So. it's-
Yeah, that's right.
That's probably L1.
It's self-selecting.
It could be L1 also.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah, if you don't have charging, you're not gonna buy a guitar.
Well, no, you can still.
No, but also,
it's not
it's, yeah.
There's a lady on my street with an Ioniq 5
who does level 1 charging exclusively.
Oh, yeah, nice, yeah, that's fun, yeah.
All right. So I put a little exploding head emoji here because it's interesting that when incentives are available in your province, that strongly weighs on your decision to buy an EV. Who would have thought? So you can see that, you know, in Alberta is a little bit on the lower end. So that would be extremely important and somewhat important, but they don't have, you know, they don't have rebates there. So,
Yeah, so Ryan, I would argue that this was a bad question to ask. Because if you look at Alberta, for example, right, since they do not have incentives, as you point out, the only people who would buy are people who don't care if there's incentives, right? So it's normal
Exactly.
that they, right? So it's not to me, it's a question that's not particularly meaningful. But this is survey stuff, right?
It's a survey,
like, no?
survey design.
I
Yeah,
mean, it's still
Yep.
meaningful because it shows that there are people who bought it and cared about the incentive.
Yeah, I think the risk is just, it doesn't show you what you think it shows you. You have to understand the context. I mean, that's true.
Yeah, so
But-
it's
it
more,
doesn't speak for the whole population for
Yeah.
one thing, because.
It talks to
it's
a
also like-
specific demographic.
Yeah, it's
So it's
not great, but it's.
it could make EVs more accessible to lower income families.
There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics.
There you go.
this one, I just kind of broke a chart down into bullet points here just for high level. So this one was interesting to me too. So 92% own or finance their EV as opposed to leasing. So there was only 7% were leasing, and then 1% had it self-identified as it being a business vehicle. 88% of EV owners are still on their very first EV. And I mean, that's not so surprising because there's more selection and things like that. So, you know, I'm not sure what the average is, but I know for me, my average ends up being 4 or 5 years on trading in. So I'm sure that'll just start to go down a bit. 83% were purchased brand new, and I mean this data here goes directly to the stuff above it, right? If there's not as much used EVs available, then obviously not as many people can buy them. But 17% were used. Quebec had the highest with new purchases at 89% of all the provinces, given their rebate structure. That's no surprise. Atlantic provinces and Manitoba tied for 24% of EVs purchased used. So considering they have some of the lowest adoption combined with no rebates, that kind of makes sense. And I've seen, I think in the Atlantic provinces, a used EV dealership network has popped up out there. So they're trying to draw used EVs from higher population centers. And then what was kind of interesting is that in the US in general, 25% of drivers purchased used. So it's kind of interesting, and be interesting to see if that data is different if they reran a survey with the new what was it?
IRA.
IRA, that's it, yes. So in demographics here, again, not a huge number of surprises, but majority of EVs are purchased by those in the middle age bracket. And I think that, you know, if we just look at disposable income and just incomes in general and stuff, you know, you do at the moment, typically need higher income to buy an EV. Average age of a Canadian EV driver is 51.3 years, which actually is higher than I would have expected. No differences between EVs and PHEVs, really. And to something Raymond had mentioned earlier, is that EV drivers are mostly, I should say, partnered men, not necessarily married, or because they could be in a domestic partnership. But yeah, so you know that's quite interesting. I think the middle chart here is something that definitely needs to be worked on in the industry, right? You know, you have 3/4 of these being purchased by men. What I didn't have time to look up is I would actually be interested to see how that breaks down for gas vehicles as well.
It's-
Similar division, right?
Do you know by any
I
chance?
don't know. It's not.
Because, yeah, that would be super interesting, because if there's more, a high percentage of women that buy gas cars, then.
That's a story, but if it's the same, then it's just.
But the same, it doesn't matter, yeah, but I suspect that it's higher than 23%.
Well, I wonder also just the reporting, right? Because as we all know, we might put our name on the car, but it's our wife that said we could buy it. So,
You didn't ask that question, oddly enough.
like, I'm not allowed to buy a Ford because my wife won't let me, so.
Or someone who says it's his car, but in fact it's
It's a
my
wife.
car.
Right, so there is stuff like that.
Or she's using it.
You know what, I have an interesting insight here, actually. So, I'm working on organizing a little EVCO in my neighborhood. And so I went door to door, like not door to door, but just went to like people who had EV in their driveway. And it was a small sample size, granted, but what I learned was that there are actually a lot of like older, middle-aged women who are really into EVs, but aren't present in like these spaces, like where we are right now. So.
And that's why we tried to like the car.
So like people who fill out these surveys, right, like there's a sampling bias
Of
there.
course, yeah.
Yeah, but you know, you say that, it's interesting you say that because our challenge, we talk about this often at the board level, is how do we reach out to those women
Other
and
demographics.
bring them in because we're almost all.
We're all news, it's a sausage
White
fest, it's
building
terrible.
males, right? So, you want diversity,
Are you
right?
middle-aged?
Well, no, I said we're almost all,
Apparently I am, but,
the
right.
rest of us are.
Yes.
Well, that boy,
Yes. You're a bit younger, and you're quite younger.
did you want to say anything else about the slide, Ryan, or you want the next one?
Nope, good to move on to the last one here. So these are just my key takeaways. So these weren't from CAA. So if you have a problem with these, you can take it up with me. So I mean, just a couple of things, I guess, observations mainly for me is we need more and reliable fast chargers to help drive adoption. We can see that, you know, the pre and post purchase concerns, that was one of the ones that didn't drop as much as the others. Incentives work. Hey, who knew? Better education and FUD battling will help make pre-purchasers more comfortable. So a lot of the stuff that you saw there in pre-purchase concerns, not saying they're not valid, it's just it kind of goes along with all the stuff that we see put out in the media and other places, right? Like, oh, your battery's gonna degrade in 4 years like an iPhone, and you'll need a new one and things like that. Solutions for multi-unit dwellings will be very important, especially as we build more dense communities. So I think about all the condo towers and things going up just along the LRT route. You know, a separate discussion is the need for a good public transit. But from a EV focus, that's going to be important to figure that out and keep, you know, like Sam and Raymond do a lot, is keep trying to push those condo places to install chargers. And then more affordable EVs and incentives will likely lead to better demographic distribution. So just as a personal example is I've been bugging my sister to go EV for a long time. Her car is ready to go. She likes the Model 3, but she lives in the Ottawa Valley. She rents an apartment. She doesn't even have the ability to run level 1, and there's no decent, you know, convenient fast chargers up there. There's no superchargers where she is either. So I think all of that will help drive adoption.
Yeah, so thanks a lot, Ryan. Excellent presentation. I think your key takeaways are bang on, and the question I have for people here is any big surprises?
I just want to make a comment that the Quebec number, about 89% of them buying new. In my experience, it's a great spot to buy a used.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. So actually, let's talk about that for a second. So if anybody's looking for a used EV in Quebec, the way it works is you get an incentive for either buying the car new or buying it used, but not both.
Right.
So if someone like you, if you're going to if you buy a new EV and you sell it used in Quebec, nobody could get an incentive for a used purchase on it. So it's better for us to go and buy it over there, Ontarians to go and buy it over there. Whereas it's the opposite for Quebecers. So if you're looking for a used EV, someone from Quebec should come in Ontario and buy an EV that's never had the new vehicle incentive in Quebec, because then it's eligible for the used incentive, right?
Oh, there's a use incentive?
Yeah, they have a
Yes.
use incentive in Quebec.
Oh, yeah, I haven't paid attention to.
It's about half actually, it's exactly half of the new incentive,
So that would make it interesting to get a used Ontario EV.
Exactly, because it's never had the rebate as a new car, so it's eligible.
No, I thought this was just a new,
Yep.
The rebate's based on the VIN number? Is it?
Yeah. So actually, before you go there, so Ryan, I wanna repeat the question there. Anybody have any surprises? Any big surprises? No big surprises, right? So that's good news. So it's not, it doesn't mean we wasted our time talking about this.
Mhm.
It means that we've confirmed through a survey that was done professionally by Plugshare, what we knew. Well, Plugshare did it on behalf of CAA. So what we knew about the market and all that is pretty representative of what the reality is, right? So good data there and good work. Okay, so news.
Yeah, so thanks, Ryan. That was excellent. And now I will take us on to the news without any ado being furthered. All right, so for the first time in history, global clean energy investment now exceeds fossil fuel investment by a factor of 2.
Whoa.
So for every dollar spent, for those of you who are bad at math, like me, for every dollar spent, it's not quite 2 actually, it's 1.7, but whatever. We're rounding up today. So for every dollar spent on fossils, $1.7 is spent on clean energy stuff. Now that's not just like windmills and solar panels, that's also EVs and stuff like that.
So does anybody know what that would have been about 5 years ago?
No,
Any idea?
Raymond's gonna take his soapbox again.
Sorry, I just want to make a point.
What is it? What was it?
It was somewhere around 20%
Yeah.
or less. Actually, 20%
Of
of
the
the
one,
fossil
yeah.
fuel was clean energy investments,
Yeah.
okay? So the point I want to make is clean energy investments are going through the roof.
Yes.
And so that's good news for all of us, right? Because we
Right.
have a lot more.
And so to put numbers on this, it's $1.7 trillion will be spent this year in 2023 on clean stuff. Now they define clean energy technologies as renewables, obviously, EVs, nuclear, grid upgrades, storage, so batteries and stuff, low emission fuels, so that's your, I don't know, corn crap, efficiency improvements and heat pumps, which we all know are actually being installed a lot quickly now. Solar investment is set to overtake oil production investment for the first time this year as well. So we are now spending more on building solar farms than looking and digging up oil. So it's
Just solar alone.
solar alone.
Solar.
So that's pretty cool. This is hope. This is good. This is gonna keep growing. Wait, yeah, okay, yeah, we're good. BrightDrop deploys 50 vans to FedEx in Canada. So if you live in Toronto, Montreal, or Surrey, BC, oddly enough, there are BrightDrop vans floating around your city. So keep an eye out. There you go. Next time you visit Montreal and get a bagel, look for some FedEx BrightDrops. They began production of the vans late last year. They're continuing to ramp production. I have that data at work that I can't talk about, but I can see the ramp happening, which is really cool. They're aiming to have a completely zero emissions fleet at FedEx by 2040. The Canadian arm, so that's FedEx International, like corporate, like US based FedEx. FedEx Express, which is the Canadian arm, plans to have half their fleet all electric by 2025. That's 2 years from now. And they want to have 100% of their fleet electric by 2030. So they are very aggressive compared to the mothership. So that's awesome. The vans are the Zevo, probably Zevo, because America. Zevo 600, and they have a range of 400 kilometers. So these are like legit cool. They're basically step vans, and they're built in Canada. So that's go team. Greenpeace launches a complaint over the tar sands ads. So if you listen to the radio like I do, because I'm old school, I guess, and I listen to like real radio, like on the airwaves, FM, you will have heard over the past couple months, these really glossy, aspirational sounding ads about how they're going carbon neutral and we care about the world and we love humanity. And then it's like you hear the byline is like the oil producers of Canada, and it's like, what? So it's Pathways Alliance is the name of the organization that's like putting out these ads. And Greenpeace is basically, they're not suing them yet, but they filed a complaint with the Competition Bureau because essentially they're basically saying it's false advertising, which if you read about it, yeah, it kind of is. So they're alleging that the Propaganda Alliance, as I call them, which was formed 2021, so it's only a couple of years old. It's basically what you would call in the olden days AstroTurf, because it's like a fake nonprofit. They've accused them of greenwashing. The Pathways Alliance, if you want to know, is consistent of the Canadian Natural Resources Limited Company, Cenovus Energy, ConocoPhillips, Imperial Oil, MEG Energy, and Suncor, the parent company of Petrocan. And they account for 95% of tar sand operations. So, yeah. And basically, they're alleging that they're going to be like net zero, and then Greenpeace is basically like, do you even know how to do math? Because that's not even possible. Like, it's literally the numbers they published are not, they don't add up. They literally, it's like you're lying. So we'll see how that turns out. But yay, at least somebody's fighting the good fight, right? Ford is going to turn their Oakville plant into a high volume manufacturing hub for all of North America, well, for North American EVs from the company. So they're going to spend $1.5 billion in the plant at Oakville Assembly. They plan on making 2 million EVs company-wide by 2026. That includes like their Mexican plants and stuff. And they expect to retool the plant starting in the second quarter of next year for production start in 2025. So they plan to 6 months to retool, and then they're up and running with EVs, hopefully. They currently produce the Ford Edge and the Lincoln Nautilus, which I didn't even know were still in production. More Rivian R2 SUV details have been released. So last month in the news, we talked about the Rivian R2, which is their cheap SUV. They're well, cheap. I mean, it's like $40,000, but they're more affordable, not $100,000 SUV. And so they've given up more details now. So they're aiming for $40,000 US as the price point. Production starts in 3 years. 2026 is their goal. That's put a grain of salt on that because that plant hasn't been built yet. So they have to build the factory first, and then they'll make the cars. So we'll see how that pans out. But hopefully they do things on time and on budget, which I'm sure happens all the time in construction. As anybody who's done renovations knows, it's always on time and on budget, right? Mm-hmm. No, just me.
Especially the electrical work.
Especially electrical. Hey, Sam. So the maximum retail price for the SUV will be $60,000. That's their target. So they want to sort of, it fits in under the R1s. They're aiming to compete with the Bronco, so it'll be like same size, same price points kind of thing. So that's kind of cool. And yeah, the factory hasn't been built, but it'll be in Georgia when it is. Fisker Ocean deliveries have begun in the U.S. So if you are on the waiting list for a Fisker Ocean, you can start, getting excited. The Ocean, they've delivered the first 22 launch edition to customers in California. They plan to ramp up deliveries all summer. The vehicles are actually made in Graz, Austria by Magna. And they're shipped to North America. So European customers actually got their first units last month. So now they're starting North American deliveries. The EPA range is actually very impressive. It's better than a Model Y, which is really, like, it's 360 miles, whatever that works out into actual measurements. But I didn't bother converting it. But 330 is the Model Y, and my poor Ioniq 5 is only 303.
So the 600 kilometers.
600 kilometers. That's not bad.
That's
right?
EPA.
That's EPA. That's EPA. That's not the WLTP, the nonsense one. That's actual EPA, legit. The starting price, which they haven't delivered yet, is 37.
Actually, 580.
Whatever, it's close enough. 37,000 is the start price in US dollars. The launch edition is actually 69,000, so they're doing the expensive ones first, and then they're working their way down. Yeah, so they expect to do. They have a 65,000 unit order backlog right now, so they'll be working through that. They expect to do around 32,000 to 36,000 this year, so half of the backlog should get answered this year, and then presumably they'll do the rest next year. So cool. NISTA opened a safety probe into Ionic 5 ICCU failures. Hey, Sam? Yeah. So if you're one of the lucky contestants of the Ionic 5 ICCU roulette, they're looking into it now, and NISTA is like investigating it. So Hyundai provided a report to NISTA because NISTA is starting to look into this. They had 30 complaints in the US, so they opened a case and they asked Hyundai for details, and Hyundai provided details. Essentially, they said that it's an overcurrent within the ICCU, which is the integrated charge control unit. So it controls like the charging and the battery and the 12 volts. So it's kind of an important piece. So there's an overvoltage situation that can happen, which damages the MOSFETs inside the controller. And it damages the DC to DC converter, whatever, resulting in the inability to recharge the 12-volt battery. And for those of you that have had it happen, you hear a pop, and then your car is like, I'm not driving anymore. So it's not fun. And they apparently can do it with a software fix in July. So there will be a campaign, and we'll see what happens. So
Are they gonna fix the taillight thing at the same time?
probably, yeah, because they've already said they're going to do that. So
They said they're gonna do it.
yeah, so that might be all rolled into the same update in July.
Last month's news.
Hmm?
That was in last month's news.
It was.
I never listened to them.
Yeah, I talk too much.
It's last call.
No, I'm good. Well, yeah, if you're here, you can get beer, but no. All right, keeping with the Hyundai Kia group, Kia has started deliveries of the EV9. So it's the 2024 EV9. It is the 3-row SUV. Starting price is $60,000 American dollars. It has a basically 100 kilowatt hour battery, so it is enormous. Range of 501 kilometers, so it's not terrible, but it is like a big honking brick. Deliveries are expected in North America starting in November. They've also announced that they're going to do a full lineup of EV1 to 9, which we kind of figured out already, but they've confirmed it that their EV1 to 9 would be the vehicles, although not all of them will make it to here. The EV1 in particular is going to be a small hatchback for the European market, because apparently North Americans need giant SUVs to go get Loblaws. So whatever, they get all the cool cars in Europe. All right, so I started seeing a lot of news items about NACS. And so I broke it down into 2 slides, so just bear with me. But these are all the charge providers that have gone on board with NACS. Some of them have said they're going to ditch CHAdeMO in favor of NACS, stuff like that. And it basically covers all the important charge companies. So like if you've been to a public charger, it has been one of these companies that made that charger. So you've got like SK Signet, ABB, BTC Power, Blink, Chem Power, Tritium. These are the brand names. These are the big names, the big players in that space, and they're all supporting NACS now. So they've all thrown their hat into that, and they're saying, look, we'll do whatever the client wants, but we will support NACS. So that's pretty cool. Now they don't decide what's on the charger, right? The charging network, like Charge Hub or Charge Point or Flow or whoever will decide what is in there. Flow is actually one of the companies that decided they'll do NACS as well. So yeah, so that's the charge companies, and then the car companies. So these are all the brands that are switching or looking at switching imminently to NACS. So you've got Ford, GM, Rivian, and Aptera that have already confirmed they're doing NACS. Hyundai Kia has also talked about joining. They're calling it the NACS Coalition, which I thought was kind of cute. So they're looking at joining the NACS Coalition pending more clarity on the high voltage charging situation. Mercedes-Benz is also evaluating it, as is everyone's favorite Ask Your Doctor pharmaceutical drug, Stellantis. And Lucid is also reluctant to join, but they're considering it. And they're also waiting for the high voltage thing to be a bit more clear to see what's going on with that.
I don't see VW on that list.
Yeah, so VW. Yeah, so they might be the big holdout.
I'm waiting for an ID buzz with NACS, but.
Yeah, you might have to wait a while. We'll see.
So I'm getting the impression, so the state of Washington has already said,
There's 2 states, so Texas and Washington State have both said that if you want public money for your charging network, it has to have NACS.
so there may be a movement to make it the standard.
There's definitely like a swell to make NACS the standard, but you might see Volkswagen and some other companies hold out and push CCS into the future a bit longer.
Why Volkswagen want to hold out?
Because Just because.
Why? Because they're admitting that Electrify America would be
Because
their initial.
Germany, I don't know.
Oh, it's their, yes, it's their money.
But the thing is, like, EA is not intrinsically tied to CCS.
Either, yeah, no, because they use the
But they
charging
convert
providers
those
at our station, so,
To NACS, so.
yeah.
So.
We'll see.
they wouldn't
I mean-
waste it.
So far, they've sort of been very cold to the idea.
But that could
Um,
also just be like German culture thing, like
It could just be,
They're-
yeah, they just could
taking
be,
their time, making that decision.
So there is a known issue that LMEG told us about with the J1772 with Volkswagen. And Volkswagen just, it's like talking to a wall when you
Yeah.
ask them about fixing it. So there may be bureaucratic,
nonsense, but yeah, Volkswagen has a lot
It'll
of,
take them a while to get on board, but hopefully they'll get on board.
they're having some internal strife about the whole EV thing to begin with, so. We'll see. I'm sure they'll come around eventually. Once like everybody else is doing it, they won't want to be the only holdout with the
I
old
also
standard.
wouldn't delay.
But then there's companies like
It's over
Nissan.
Because you're gonna be able to buy adapters anyway.
Yeah, but I mean, there's what makes sense, and then there's what car companies do, like Nissan with Chatamo in 2024, like.
So that's an important point you made there, Lawrence. So
Yeah,
when we're talking to the public and this comes up, right? The message to the public is,
don't worry about it.
don't worry about it because there'll be adapters.
Don't worry about it. It's
It's not gonna be an issue. It's actually gonna be better.
Yeah.
Because you should be able to use, charge your.
don't worry about it.
Right? So
They'll make them
we
understand.
don't want people to see this as a reason to wait. Right?
It's definitely not a reason to wait. Because at the end of the day, even if you buy a CCS car today, it'll still be compatible because of the protocols. And the adapter won't be cheap. It'll just be a new dongle, whatever. Model Y is the best-selling vehicle in the US, second only to the F-150. So when you're listening to the old-timey radio like I do in the car, and you hear Toyota being like, we are the best, the RAV4 is the best-selling vehicle. No, actually, it's not the best-selling SUV. Toyota, stop lying. It's a Model Y.
But it was in 2019.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, sure. I mean, Toyota, whatever, they're allowed to lie, I guess, and be wrong. It's fair. So yeah, the numbers are there, but basically for the first 4 months of this year, Model Y is the best-selling EV by a long margin. In fact, Tesla, not Toyota, Tesla sold more Model Ys than all of their other models combined in that period. So that just gives you a bit of an impression as to like how many they've moved. So that's pretty freaking cool.
Fair
Yeah.
price, you know, and good.
Yeah, good product. They dropped the price by 20 grand last year, and
They're
that,
making at least 20,000 a week.
yeah, no, it's
They're
insane.
making huge amounts.
And so because they're doing so much for the EV industry, I mean, they're like half of EV sales in the US are Tesla alone. Tesla has, or the United States EV market share has now reached 7%. So they're, like I keep saying, a year behind us, right? We were at 8, now they're at 7. So actually maybe 2 years if you do the math. It doesn't matter. They're a couple years behind us in the adoption curve, but they're on their way.
But they have better incentives now, so they'll probably catch
So
up.
they might catch up. Yeah, that might squish the curve more. So that'll, hopefully we'll see that happen. All right, so not to prolong the news too much longer, there's only like 2 more slides left. Cybertruck has been spotted, there's a picture, in New Zealand. And the reason it's in New Zealand is because right now in the bottom half of the earth, it's wintertime. And cars that come to market soon need to go through winter testing. And because it's summer here and we don't have any snow in Canada, they're sending it down to New Zealand to do some winter testing before it comes onto the market, which everyone is saying will be the end of Q3, according to Elon Musk. So you translate that into Tesla time, probably like October, end of September-ish, maybe. They'll start delivery. Now, they won't be like mass, like if you're waiting for a Cybertruck, it won't be this year, guaranteed. It'll be the 11 people in the factory that ordered them that are living in Texas that will get them first, right? Like it's not us, but it's a step, right? And the fact that it's gone into winter testing in New Zealand means that they're pushing that program forward, and they have it mature enough that they can start running it in the winter to see how it behaves. There is a proving ground in New Zealand that a lot of car companies use if the North American ones are summer. And so, yeah, so that's cool, right? Northern hemisphere, look at me spelling properly at night. Tesla Semi recall. So this isn't all that interesting. Like it's a door thing and they fixed it with software already. The recall is not important. It's not a big deal. What was interesting is the number of vehicles affected, because so to put some context, right? The Semi started deliveries in November, right? They had a big event with Pepsi and Yay, we're delivering electric trucks and this is awesome. And that was a while ago. And so the fact that the recall impacted just 36 vehicles, which happens to be the size of the Pepsi order, is a little concerning, because if you do the Electrek or whoever, I have that in the notes, they did the run rate. It was Electrek. So they calculated the run rate, and it's basically a new truck every like 2 weeks. So like they're like hand building these things, which is not the best news you want to hear 7-8 months into a production cycle of a ramp, right? So a little concerned about that, but hopefully they're just shaking out the bugs and that they're going to ramp soon. But yeah, there's only 36 on the road, which is not what we were kind of hoping to hear, because Tesla had lofty goals, right? They were like 20,000 or whatever, 2,400 or something by the end of this year was their goal. And it's,
They eventually want to produce 50,000.
they want to produce 50,000 a year. And then like they built 36 in 8 months. Like, okay, cool. Not great. Now it's time for Raymond.
Yeah.
Again.
Time.
Thunder. Thunderous applause for nature.
Lightning and thunder.
If you guys didn't hear that on the camera, that's fine. It's just thundered a lot.
And it's raining like.
It is raining like the apocalypse.
There's lightning and thunder.
So
So why don't they do winter testing in Jasper
Because it's summertime right now.
and snowing?
Maybe.
They actually go to
Or
Alaska.
Alaska.
They usually go to Alaska.
Yeah.
So, past events, I'll try to go fast through all these events. So, apologies to those who showed up other, not on Parkdale, but elsewhere on last Saturday.
Iris.
Yeah, sorry about that. There was a mix up, and for some reason, I think I created the event and I probably
Copy and
copied
paste
and
it.
pasted. Anyways, whatever. But anyways, there were 2 successful events apparently, because one of my friends who I played hockey with Monday morning was asking me where I was. He says, weren't you supposed to be there? And no, I wasn't. But he talked to Alan. I don't know if Alan's online now, but he talked to Alan, and Alan had his at Sparky. So they had a good conversation about.
Apparently there were a whole bunch of people at the Iris location.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But the one we were at, there was
Had a whole bunch of new people
we had a
too.
whole bunch of
Yeah.
people, so it was great. So anyway, so those were the locations for this this month. Is this thing gonna work?
They got a little closer.
Here we go. Blackburn Fun Fair, you guys, well, several of you were there, right? So it turned out pretty well. There was some conflicts with doors open, and apparently there was another fun fair in the Capsia Coty, what do you call that? The ward right beside ours. So it reduced the amount of people coming over. But bottom line is we did quite a few test drives, especially in the few cars like usual. So the Ioniq 5 and actually the Ioniq 5.
Yeah, not mine. Mine.
And yeah, you weren't there yet. And
Yes, last.
yeah. So one thing I'll mention is and I forgot to put that in the slide, but just a note of caution, okay? For insurance reasons, we must not only normally when we do scouting stuff, so Sam and I and Mike have been scouting stuff, and the rule there was you had to have 2 adults with any minor, right? The rule though with EnviroCenter is stricter than that. We have to have a guardian there with the kid, okay? So we can't take a minor on a test drive, or test ride, not test drive, test ride, if there isn't a guardian in the car, okay? And please be careful, it's not, we want to drive slowly around our display, because there's pedestrians, right? So anyways, it went quite well. Okay, so this thing, the event renewable power for all, I think there's only myself and Nicola of our group that showed up. You showed up to this, right? You were there, yeah. So they gave a petition to Minister Guilbeault, and he was quite happy to receive, and he was telling us, do more of this, do more of this. He's an activist. You guys probably don't know this or may know this, but he's one of the founders of EVCO, which is an environmental organization based in Montreal. And actually, they provide funding for l'AVEC in Quebec. So anyways, So it was a pretty good event. Then we did a relatively small event at the Carleton Sprott School of Business. The picture at the bottom there, that's an electric ATV, right? So it's Polaris side by side. They've had these for a number of years. And it's entirely battery electric, so it was cool. So I took a picture of that. We were quite busy. We did quite a few test drives there. There we are. Then I did an OREC presentation, or a presentation to OREC. So OREC was our guest last time, right? But actually I did a presentation to a bunch of OREC members about EVs, essentially EV 101. It went really well. I stole Mike's material. And I just went. So anyways, it went quite well. It's recorded, so I don't know how they're going to publish it, but they're going to probably publish it soon. This last weekend, we had the Seats for Kids event. So Seats is an organization that Mike's wife is very much involved in. And what they do is they help people understand how to properly install child seats in vehicles. And they also help underprivileged communities and underprivileged people to get seats, okay, if they can't afford it. So we did an event with them yesterday.
Yesterday, yeah.
During the smoke apocalypse or whatever, smoke apocalypse.
I haven't seen that many masks since like the
COVID.
Yeah.
COVID.
So it was backwards. You take the mask off when you get in the car, not.
My eyes were actually hurting. It was so bad with the after 4 hours outside.
Yeah, it was not great. I'm sorry.
But it was a pretty good event. We did quite a few test drives, lots of good conversations with a lot of people, like usual.
And a lot of people who were really interested, I think, in actually buying, like they were, they were really interested as opposed to just asking questions or whatever, just for the sake.
Yeah. So really good audience there. So anyway, next monthly meeting is July 31st, the very last day of the month. Okay. Kilowatts and coffee. Right now we have only 2 that are. I don't know if you want to book more.
I
have events in some weekends, but
keep an eye on the calendar because it's a bit in flux with summer holidays going on. But yeah, keep an eye on the calendar.
So July 1st, Britannia Coffee House, and July 8th, Soul Cafe in Dunrobin. For those of you who are,
It's heart and soul, by the way.
Hey?
It's heart and soul.
It's heart and soul.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll have to change that. So I put it on the website.
The address is there. We'll fix it.
Yeah. So anyways, the July 8th, we have another event in
Dunrobin.
It's in Dunrobin. I think it's right here, or is it? Yeah, so it's an in-person event with OREC. OREC is actually doing an event where they're bringing members in person at this location in Dunrobin. We have 6 people, I think, already signed up to bring their cars. So that's enough for this event. So we're just going to be showing the cars and all that and participating in the OREC event. And again, if you're not an OREC investor and you have some cash you want to place somewhere, it's as close as you could get to. And I'm not providing official financial advice as a financial planner or anything, but it's the closest I could find in terms of returns that are quite secure, right? So I think they're a bit too risk averse actually, but they're quite risk averse and they've got reasonable returns. So anyways, this is the same day as the Cars and Coffee, so we'll go from the Cars and Coffee to this. Here it's in Dunrobin too.
Yeah.
So it should be interesting. It's not a big long event either. So Capital Cruise for Kids, we had that on the list last time. So July 15th, this is booth only, so we don't need a huge amount of people. We do have 2 shifts, so should be an interesting opportunity to talk to people who are there.
Cars involved too.
Yeah, but it's going to be an opportunity to reach out to people who are not that are outside of the bubble, right? So next slide. There you go. Okay. So the Canada Science and Technology Museum, Saturday, July 29th. This is a booth inside, so we don't need a huge amount of people. And we need people, at least 1 person for every shift this week's French. I'll be there in the morning shift, but I'm not available in the afternoon shift. So 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. And we'll be inside with a few little things there. So we've got some electric cars that We're buying to give to kids who answer the correct.
We're giving away Hot Wheels, not actual cars.
So sorry,
Just be clear.
Oh, so they're not electric.
They're Hot Wheels of electric cars.
yeah.
So they're not electric.
Only kids?
Well, they're gravity powered, really.
Only kids, yeah.
Bring your kids, grandkids, nephews.
So there's a big gap here between what I just said and this one here. We're gonna fill it. We're just not sure what it's gonna be yet. But there'll be, Capital Pride will have a booth on Bank Street somewhere, not exactly sure where yet, but from 12 PM to 8 PM. 2 shifts there again. I will be at the early shift. Again, I've got something, the late shift. Then the next one is September 23rd at Lansdowne Park. So we're starting to get more details about this. So we're going to invite dealers to participate, and Enviro Center has already signed up to have a booth, and they'll have a bunch of e-bike vendors there. So it should be an interesting event, something similar to what we had last year, essentially. Okay. Then West Bar Haven test drives, that'll be Saturday, October 14th, quite late in the year. Not sure the exact location yet. This is something that Enviro Center has booked for us, but we haven't, we don't have all the details yet. Well, again, reminder that we have more than 48.
It was like 69 last time.
So our channel has got some information there. If you're looking for, there's a few presentations there that talk about various topics. So if you have a friend who wants to know something really easier, you're welcome to use this as a launching point for discussions and all that, right? There you go. Oh, how come that's still there? That's wrong. Okay, that shouldn't be there anymore. I forgot to take it out. Sorry about that. Same thing there. Peak Perks program. I signed up, but I haven't heard anything, so I forgot to take all these signs out here.
So if you're watching us on YouTube, this is where your video ends. If you want to participate in our roundtables, come in person in the meeting, or you can join us live on Teams. Just visit our website, evco.ca, for more information on when our next meeting is and how to participate. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next month.
Or they could come to Kilowatts and Coffee.
Or they can come to Kilowatts and Coffee too in person, which is always fun on the weekend.